A little girl ran crying to a cowboy, "Please follow me home." What he found was heartbreaking. Jake was sitting on the fence outside the small town, watching the sun slowly disappear behind the distant hills. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the wind carried the smell of dry grass and dust. He held the reins of his horse loosely in one hand, letting the animal graze near him. It was a quiet evening, and for a moment everything felt peaceful. Jake had lived in this part of Texas all his life, and he knew every twist of the trails, every dusty road, and every neighbor's house. Life was simple here, and Jake liked it that way. He was a man of routine. Every morning he would wake before sunrise, feed the horses, check the fences, and walk around the fields. He had no family of his own, but the people in town respected him. They knew he was honest, reliable, and had a kind heart, even if he rarely spoke more than necessary. Children liked him because he was gentle, and adults trusted him because he kept his word. As Jake leaned back on the fence, letting his horse graze, he heard a noise that made him sit up straight. At first it was faint, just a soft cry carried by the wind. He frowned and looked around, trying to find the source. The town was quiet at this hour, and most people were already inside their homes. But the sound continued, louder now, urgent and desperate. It was the cry of a child. Without a second thought, Jake got off the fence and started walking toward the sound. His boots kicked up dust with every step. The crying grew louder, and soon he saw her. She was a small girl, maybe 7 years old, running toward him with tears streaming down her cheeks. Her hair was messy and her dress was torn in places. Her tiny shoes were caked with dirt, and her small hands were scratched and scraped. She looked scared, as if she had been running for a long time. "Please, please follow me," she cried, her voice shaking. "Please follow me home." Jake felt a sudden pang in his chest. There was something in her voice that made him stop and listen. It wasn't just fear, there was desperation, a kind of helplessness that made him want to do whatever he could to help her. "Hey, it's okay," Jake said gently, crouching down so he was closer to her level. "I'll come with you, don't worry." The girl hesitated for a moment, then grabbed his hand tightly. She ran a few steps ahead, glancing back to make sure he was following. Jake picked up his pace, careful not to run but determined to keep up. He noticed the scratches on her arms, the dirt smudged across her face, and the way she shivered even though it wasn't cold. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. I'm fine," she said quickly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. But something's wrong at home. Please, you have to come." Jake nodded, sensing the urgency in her words. He didn't ask any questions. Sometimes it was better to act first and ask later. He walked beside her, keeping his eyes on the path ahead. The girl led him through narrow streets and past empty lots. Dust rose with every step, sticking to his boots and the bottom of his jeans. As they walked, Jake tried to make small talk, hoping to ease her fear. "What's your name?" he asked. "Molly," she whispered. "Well, Molly," Jake said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "We'll get there soon, okay? Just a little further." Molly nodded, but her grip on his hand didn't loosen. She seemed too afraid to speak, too afraid to let go. Jake realized she had been through something difficult. Maybe she had been running from someone, or maybe she had been left alone. Either way, he knew she needed help, and he was determined to make sure she got it. The path led them out of the main part of town and onto a trail surrounded by tall grass and scattered trees. The sun was lower now, and shadows stretched across the ground. Birds chirped as they returned to their nests, and the wind rustled the leaves. Everything seemed calm, but Jake felt a tension in the air. Molly's small hand in his was warm, but her trembling made him realize just how scared she was. "Almost there," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "Just a little further." Molly nodded again, but she didn't speak. She only ran a few steps ahead and then stopped, looking back at him. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and worry. Jake felt his chest tighten. He wanted to ask what had happened, but he knew she might not be ready to tell him yet. Sometimes children needed time to trust before they could speak. They reached the edge of the town, where the trail ended at a small, old house. The paint was faded and the fence was broken in places. The yard was overgrown with weeds and the door looked like it hadn't been fixed in years. Molly stopped at the gate, staring at the house with a mix of fear and sadness. Jake crouched down again and looked at her. "This is it, huh?" he asked gently. Molly nodded, tears streaming down her face again. "Please just come in. Please, you have to see." Jake took a deep breath. He didn't know what he would find inside, but he knew he couldn't leave her. He stood, adjusted his hat, and followed her through the gate. The wooden boards creaked under his weight, and he noticed how the wind blew through the broken fence, making a low, eerie sound. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The air smelled of dust and something else, something unpleasant that made Jake wrinkle his nose. He looked around and saw broken furniture, empty cupboards, and dirty clothes scattered across the floor. It was clear that no one had been taking care of this house properly. Molly led him to a small room at the back. She opened the door slowly, almost as if she were afraid of what she would see. Jake stepped inside and froze for a moment. The room was messy and dark. There were signs of neglect everywhere, an empty plate on the table, a torn blanket on the floor, and toys scattered as if they had been abandoned in a hurry. Molly whispered, He doesn't care. He's always gone. I don't know what to do." Jake felt a lump in his throat. He didn't need to ask who she meant. He could see it in the room, in the way she looked at him. Molly had been alone, scared and struggling, and no one had noticed. He knelt down beside her, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's okay, Molly," he said softly. "You're not alone anymore. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out together." Molly's small body shook as she buried her face in his chest, crying quietly. Jake held her, feeling the weight of her fear and sadness. He knew this was just the beginning, that there was more to understand, more to fix. But at this moment, he simply let her cry, letting her feel safe for the first time in a long while. Outside, the sun disappeared completely, leaving the sky a deep shade of purple. The world seemed to pause for a moment, as if waiting for what would come next. Inside the small house, Jake held a little girl who had been through too much, and he promised himself that he would do everything he could to help her. He didn't know what the night would bring or what challenges lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain: Molly was safe with him now, and he wouldn't let anything happen to her. For the first time in a long while, Molly felt a small spark of hope. And for Jake, he realized that sometimes helping a child in need could change his life just as much as it changed theirs. Jake stayed close to Molly as they stepped out of the small, dim room and into the hallway. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, except for the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards under their feet. Jake noticed how the walls were faded, the wallpaper peeling in places, and dust covering the shelves. Every corner of the house seemed to tell a story of neglect. He could feel Molly trembling beside him, her small hand gripping his tightly. Do you live here alone?" Jake asked gently. Molly shook her head quickly. "No, he's here sometimes, but he doesn't care. I tried to tell him, but he just leaves." Her voice cracked and she looked down at the floor. Jake could see that she was holding back more tears. He knelt down to her level. "Molly, it's okay. You don't have to be afraid. I'm here and I'll help you." Molly nodded, wiping her tears with her small sleeve. She took a deep breath and pointed toward a closed door at the end of the hallway. "He's in there. I don't want to go near him, but you have to see." Jake hesitated. He didn't know what he would find behind that door. But he knew one thing: Molly had trusted him enough to bring him here. That trust was more important than his own fear or caution. He nodded and whispered, "Okay, we'll go together." He moved slowly, his boots making soft sounds on the dusty floor. Molly stayed close, walking just behind him, her small feet shuffling over the creaky boards. As they reached the door, Jake could hear muffled sounds from inside. It was hard to tell exactly what it was, but it sounded like movement, maybe talking, maybe shouting. Jake gently pushed the door open and peeked inside. The room was small and messy. There was a worn-out chair in one corner and a table covered with papers, empty bottles, and a few broken toys. Sitting in the chair was a man, unshaven and tired-looking. His clothes were wrinkled and he seemed distracted, staring off into space. He didn't notice Jake and Molly standing at the doorway. Jake took a step forward. "Hello there," he said calmly. The man looked up, startled. Who are you?" the man asked, his voice unsure. "My name is Jake. I'm here with Molly," Jake replied. "I think she needs some help and I want to make sure she's safe." The man frowned, looking at Molly, then back at Jake. "She's fine. She's just a kid. She needs to mind her own business," he said dismissively. Jake's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't say anything. He looked down at Molly, who was trembling, and he knew he had to act carefully. He knelt beside her again. "Molly, do you want to tell me what's been happening?" he asked softly. Molly's small voice barely rose above a whisper. He doesn't care. He leaves me alone. I have to find my own food. I try to clean, but I can't do it all. Sometimes I cry and he doesn't even notice." Her voice shook and she hugged herself tightly. Jake felt his chest tighten. He had known the girl was scared, but hearing her speak about her life made it even more real. He reached out and gently took her hand. "You're not alone anymore, Molly. I promise. I'm here for you." The man in the chair looked uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat, avoiding Jake's gaze. She's exaggerating. I do my best," he muttered. Jake shook his head slowly. "No, she's telling the truth. I can see it. She's been through a lot and she deserves to be safe and cared for." The man leaned back in the chair, sighing heavily. He didn't argue further, but there was a sense of guilt in his eyes. Jake could tell he wasn't a cruel man, just a man who had failed to see what a child needed. Molly took a small step closer to Jake, feeling safer with him nearby. Can we leave?" she asked softly. Jake nodded. "Yes, we can, but we need to make sure you have someone to look after you while we figure things out." The man didn't respond, just stared at the floor. Jake turned back to Molly. "It's okay. We'll take care of everything. You don't need to worry." Outside the room, the house was still quiet. The sun had set completely now, leaving the sky dark with only a few stars twinkling. Jake led Molly back down the hallway, holding her hand tightly. She walked beside him, still trembling, but there was a small spark of relief in her eyes. "Do you want to tell me what your favorite things are?" Jake asked as they walked. "Sometimes talking about happy things can help when you're scared." Molly thought for a moment. I like horses, and I like reading books. I like when people tell me stories." Jake smiled. "Well, you're in luck. I know a few good stories, and as for horses, I've got plenty. We can visit them tomorrow if you want." Molly's lips curled into a small smile. It was the first time Jake had seen her smile without tears. "Really?" she asked, her voice small but hopeful. "Really," Jake said firmly. "But first, we need to make sure you're safe tonight." He led her outside where his horse was waiting. Molly's eyes lit up when she saw the animal. Can I ride it?" she asked. Jake nodded. "Of course, but let's walk for a bit first. I want to make sure we're going the right way." They walked down the trail together, the night air cool and calm around them. The sounds of the town were far behind them, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant call of an owl. Molly leaned against Jake as they walked, feeling safer with every step. After a while, Jake decided it was time to rest. He found a small clearing near the trail and set up a simple place for Molly to sit. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "There, that should keep you warm," he said softly. Molly hugged the jacket tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Jake smiled. "You're welcome, Molly. You don't have to thank me. I'm happy to help." As they sat together, Jake asked gently, "Do you want to tell me more about what happened at home?" Molly hesitated, then nodded. Sometimes he yells. And I don't know what to do. I get scared. I try to clean up and make things better, but it's too much. And I just want someone to care." Jake's heart ached for her. He could feel the weight of her loneliness, the years of feeling unnoticed and uncared for. "You're not alone anymore, Molly. I care, and I'll make sure you're safe. No one will hurt you while I'm around." Molly's small body relaxed a little, and she leaned against him, trusting him completely. For the first time in a long while, she felt like someone was truly listening, truly caring about her. Jake looked up at the stars, thinking about how many children like Molly might be out there, unnoticed and in need of help. He made a silent promise to himself that he would do everything he could to protect her and make sure she had a chance at a better life. The night passed slowly, with Jake keeping a careful watch over Molly. He told her small stories about the horses he knew, about adventures he had when he was younger, and about the simple joys of life in the countryside. Molly listened, captivated, and for a moment, the fear that had weighed on her for so long seemed to lift. By the time the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, Molly was asleep, wrapped in Jake's jacket. Jake watched her quietly, feeling a deep sense of responsibility and determination. He knew that today would be the day they took the next steps to help her, but for now, he was just glad she was safe. As the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Jake felt a sense of hope. Molly had trusted him, and he would not let her down. Together, they would face whatever came next, and Jake knew that with patience, care, and love, the little girl could begin to heal from the fear and sadness that had filled her life for too long. Jake waited until Molly had slept quietly before he stood and looked around the small clearing. The early morning light painted the landscape in soft yellow and orange, and the birds were beginning to chirp. He knew they couldn't stay outside forever. Molly needed food, shelter, and safety, and the truth about her home had to be addressed. He gently shook Molly awake. "Time to get up, Molly. We have a busy day ahead," he whispered. Molly rubbed her eyes and yawned. Do we have to go back there?" she asked softly. Jake shook his head. "No, not back there, but we need to see what we can do to help you. And first, we'll make sure you have some breakfast and a safe place to stay." Molly nodded, and together they walked toward the nearest small store in the town. The streets were quiet, and Jake felt relieved that few people were around to notice a little girl and a cowboy walking early in the morning. They entered the store, and the clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled warmly. "Good morning, Jake," she said. "And who's this little one?" "This is Molly," Jake said gently. "She needs some breakfast, please." The woman nodded and quickly prepared a plate of warm food, pancakes, eggs, and fresh milk. She set the plate in front of Molly, who ate quietly but hungrily, her small hands trembling as she held the fork. Jake watched her, silently thankful that she was finally safe for the moment. "It's okay to eat slowly," he said softly. "Take your time." After breakfast, Jake led Molly toward the local authorities. He had already called them the night before to explain the situation, and now it was time for them to step in officially. The Child Services office was a short walk away, and Molly held Jake's hand tightly as they approached. Inside, a kind woman named Mrs. Evans greeted them. She knelt to Molly's level. "Hello, sweetie. My name is Mrs. Evans. I'm here to help you." Molly hesitated, then whispered, I'm scared. What if he comes back?" Mrs. Evans smiled gently. "No one is going to hurt you, Molly. You are safe now. We are here to take care of you." Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. Finally, Molly was beginning to feel some protection. He stayed with her as she answered questions about her home and her father. Through her small voice and hesitant words, Molly told them about the nights she had spent alone, the cold evenings without enough blankets, the hunger that sometimes gnawed at her stomach, and the fear she felt whenever her father shouted or ignored her. Jake's chest ached as he listened. He had known it would be bad, but hearing the details made it even more real. He reached out and gently held her small hand. "You're safe now, Molly. No one will leave you alone again." Mrs. Evans nodded. "We'll make sure of that, Jake." Molly will be placed in a safe foster home and will work on making sure she has everything she needs. Molly looked up at Jake, her eyes wide. "Really?" she asked. "Really," Jake said firmly. "You don't have to be scared anymore." The process of documenting her situation took some time, but Molly remained calm with Jake by her side. After the paperwork was complete, Mrs. Evans led them outside. "We'll arrange a safe place for her today. You can come visit her, Jake, if you'd like." Jake smiled. "I'd like that very much." Molly's face brightened at the words. She finally allowed herself to feel hope. It had been so long since anyone had cared about her safety and well-being, and now she could see that someone genuinely did. After seeing Molly safely settled in a temporary care home, Jake returned to the house where her father lived. He knew the man wasn't cruel by nature, but it was clear that he had failed Molly in a way that no excuse could justify. Jake wanted to understand the situation fully and to ensure that Molly's father would be held accountable for neglect. He approached the small house, noticing how different it looked in the light of day. The broken fences, faded walls, and untidy yard were even more obvious now. He knocked on the door and the man answered, looking tired and uncertain. "Jake," he said, his voice quiet. I don't know what to say." Jake stepped forward calmly. "You need to take responsibility for Molly. She's a child and she deserves care, attention, and love. You failed to provide that." The man's eyes filled with guilt. I didn't mean to, I've been busy, I thought I was doing enough." Jake shook his head. "Enough isn't enough. Molly needed you and you weren't there. She's safe now, but she won't be going back until you can prove you can care for her properly." The man hung his head, unable to respond. Jake turned and left the house, his thoughts heavy but his resolve firm. Molly was safe, and that was what mattered most. Over the next few days, Jake visited Molly regularly. Each visit he brought small gifts, a new book, some candy, sometimes a simple toy. More importantly, he brought stories, laughter, and attention. Molly began to open up, speaking more about her dreams and fears. She told him about the horses she loved, the books she wanted to read, and the small things she enjoyed before her life had become so difficult. Jake listened patiently, never rushing her. He realized that healing wasn't just about removing her from danger. It was about giving her love, trust, and hope, and he was determined to give her all of that. One afternoon, while they were sitting under a large oak tree near the foster home, Molly asked softly, "Jake, will I ever be able to see my dad again?" Jake thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe one day, Molly. But right now, your safety and happiness are the most important, and you can't worry about things that might hurt you." Molly nodded, understanding. She leaned against Jake, feeling safe and protected. For the first time in her young life, she could breathe without fear. Jake continued to visit her, helping her adjust to her new environment. He noticed small changes each day, a brighter smile, a more relaxed posture, and the beginnings of trust. Molly even started reading some of the books he brought her, sitting quietly in the sun as she turned the pages with careful attention. One morning, Jake took Molly to meet the horses he had mentioned before. As they walked into the stable, Molly's eyes widened. They're real," she whispered, her voice full of wonder. Jake smiled. "Yes, they're real, and you can help take care of them if you want." Molly's small face lit up with excitement. She ran her hands along the soft fur of a brown horse, feeling the warmth and strength beneath her fingers. For the first time, she felt a sense of joy that wasn't mixed with fear or sadness. Jake watched her, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. He had brought her to safety, but now he was helping her discover happiness again. It was a slow process, but every small smile and laugh reminded him why he had taken that first step to follow her home. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Jake and Molly walked back to the foster home. Molly held his hand tightly, and Jake felt a quiet pride. He knew the journey wasn't over, but he also knew that with patience, care, and love, Molly would grow stronger each day. That evening, as Jake left the foster home, Molly waved to him from the window, her small face glowing with happiness. Jake tipped his hat and smiled. He had seen heartbreak, but he had also seen hope. And that hope, fragile as it was, gave him the strength to keep helping. Jake knew that Molly's story wasn't unique. There were many children like her out there. But for now, he had made a difference in one little girl's life, and that was enough. He walked back to his horse, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold, knowing that Molly was safe, cared for, and beginning to heal. Days passed, and each day Molly grew stronger. The fear that had always lived in her eyes slowly began to fade, replaced by a small spark of hope. She had started to smile more often, and she even laughed sometimes when Jake visited. The foster home provided her with warmth, food, and comfort, but it was Jake's presence that made her feel truly safe. Jake continued to visit Molly regularly. Every morning he would bring her something small, a book, a drawing, or sometimes just his stories from the ranch. Molly loved hearing about the adventures he had when he was younger, how he cared for the horses, and the simple joys of life in the countryside. These stories made her laugh and filled her imagination with light and color, a stark contrast to the darkness she had known at home. One morning, Jake arrived at the foster home with a surprise. He had borrowed a small horse from a nearby ranch, and he wanted Molly to meet it. When she saw the horse, her eyes widened in amazement. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Jake smiled. "Yes, it is. And today you get to ride it if you want." Molly hesitated for a moment, fear mixing with excitement. "Really? I can." "Of course," Jake said gently. "I'll be right here with you the whole time." With Jake guiding her, Molly climbed onto the horse. Her small hands gripped the reins tightly and her legs trembled slightly. Jake stayed close, holding the horse steady and giving her small words of encouragement. Slowly, she began to relax. The horse walked calmly, and Molly's laughter rang out in the morning air. For the first time in years, she felt joy without fear. As they walked back to the foster home, Molly looked up at Jake with a smile. "Thank you, Jake. I feel happy, really happy." Jake's heart warmed. "I'm glad, Molly. You deserve to feel happy every day. And we'll make sure you do." The foster home staff noticed the change in Molly. She was more confident, spoke more openly, and even started participating in activities with other children. Jake worked with her patiently, helping her adjust to her new life. He taught her small lessons about caring for herself, being kind, and trusting people again. Every time she achieved something, no matter how small, Jake celebrated with her. One afternoon, Molly asked Jake to sit with her under a large oak tree in the yard. "Jake," she said softly, do you think my dad will ever change?" Jake looked at her, considering his words carefully. "Maybe someday," he said gently. "But right now it's not safe for you to be with him. You need to focus on yourself, on being happy and strong." "And you can do that, Molly. I believe in you." Molly nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I want to be strong," she whispered. "I don't want to be scared anymore." "You will be," Jake said firmly. "And I'll be here to help you every step of the way." The weeks turned into months, and Molly continued to grow. She learned to read more fluently, played games with other children, and explored her surroundings with curiosity and joy. Jake remained a constant presence in her life. He took her to see the horses regularly, taught her how to care for them, and even shared stories of his own childhood adventures. Each day, Molly's confidence grew, and the sadness that had weighed on her for so long slowly lifted. One day, as they were walking back from the stables, Molly looked up at Jake with a thoughtful expression. "Jake," she said, "I want to do something for you. You've helped me so much. I want to help someone else too." Jake smiled, touched by her words. "That's a wonderful idea, Molly, and you can. Even small acts of kindness make a big difference." Molly thought for a moment and then smiled brightly. "I want to draw pictures for the other kids in the foster home. Maybe they will feel happy too." "That's perfect," Jake said. "And I'll help you deliver them. We can make a difference together." As the months continued, Molly's life transformed. She became known in the foster home for her bright smile and kind heart. Other children looked up to her, and she began to feel a sense of belonging she had never known before. Jake's patience, guidance, and love had helped her heal from the neglect and fear that had dominated her early years. One evening, Jake sat with Molly on the porch of the foster home, watching the sun set over the fields. Molly leaned against him, a small blanket draped over her shoulders. She looked at the sky, her eyes full of wonder. "Jake," she said softly, "I feel happy now. I think I can be brave. I think I can do anything." Jake smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride. "Yes, Molly, you can do anything. You're strong, smart, and brave. And remember, you don't have to face anything alone. I'll always be here if you need me." Molly hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Jake, for everything." "You don't have to thank me," Jake said, hugging her back. "Seeing you happy is thanks enough." As the days went by, Jake continued to support Molly. He helped her with schoolwork, played games with her, and taught her lessons about life and responsibility. He also worked with the authorities to ensure that her father was held accountable for his neglect, while also making sure Molly would never be separated from the people who cared for her. Molly flourished in her new life. She developed close friendships with the other children, and her laughter became a common sound in the foster home. She continued to ride horses with Jake, read books, and create drawings for the other children. Each day, she grew stronger, happier, and more confident. One special afternoon, Jake took Molly to a quiet meadow filled with wildflowers. The sun shone brightly, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. Molly ran ahead, her arms outstretched, laughing freely. Jake watched her, his heart swelling with pride. "Molly," he called, "come here for a moment." She ran back to him, breathless and smiling. "What is it, Jake?" Jake knelt down and looked into her eyes. "I want you to remember something important. No matter what happens in life, you are brave, kind, and strong. And you can overcome anything as long as you believe in yourself and let the people who care about you help you." Molly nodded solemnly, taking in his words. "I will, Jake, I promise." Jake smiled. "Good, and remember, you're never alone. You have friends, you have people who care, and most importantly, you have hope." The years went by, and Molly grew into a confident, happy young girl. She never forgot the cowboy who had followed her home that day when she was small, the man who had given her safety, care, and hope. She carried his lessons with her always: courage, kindness, and the power of love and compassion. Jake, too, felt the lasting impact of that day. Helping Molly had changed his life as much as it had changed hers. He realized that even small acts of courage, like following a scared little girl down a dusty trail, could make the biggest difference in the world. One sunny afternoon, as Molly played in the yard of the foster home, Jake watched from a distance. She laughed freely, her eyes sparkling, and ran toward the horses he had introduced her to. He tipped his hat, smiling quietly to himself. He had saved a life that day, but in return he had learned the joy of truly making a difference. Molly waved at him, her small hand raised high. "Thank you, Jake," she called out. Jake waved back, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "You're welcome, Molly. Remember, always be brave and kind." As the sun set over the fields, Jake mounted his horse and rode slowly down the trail, thinking about how far they had both come. From that first moment when a little girl ran crying toward him, pleading for help, to this day filled with laughter, hope, and happiness, Jake knew that life had a way of rewarding those who chose to act with compassion. And for Molly, life had transformed completely. The fear and sadness that had once clouded her young heart were replaced with hope, trust, and joy. She had learned that even in the darkest times, there could be light, and sometimes that light came in the form of a cowboy who simply chose to care.